Since regaining power in 2021, the Taliban have been incredibly diplomatically isolated. Until recently, the so-called Islamic Emirates wasn't officially recognised as the legitimate government of Afghanistan by any other country, and they'd even fallen out with countries that had once been relatively friendly with them, including Pakistan. However, in recent months, several countries, including Russia, India, China, Iran, and even European democracies like Germany and Austria, have been cooperating with the Taliban on matters like trade, energy, and migration. And in July, Russia became the first country to officially recognise the Taliban government, with others like Uzbekistan also signalling their intent to follow suit. So in this video, we'll explain why more and more countries are re-engaging with the Taliban, and whether this trend will continue. Dive deeper into politics with our magazine, Too Long. Yes, we made a real physical magazine. In the latest issue, we discuss if Europe can really defend itself, why people like Putin get away with it, and if we're observing the end of the American order. Find out more by clicking the link in the description. Let's start with some context. The Taliban first took power in Afghanistan around 1996, in the aftermath of the Afghan Civil War, whereupon they imposed a harsh interpretation of Islamic Sharia law. They systematically massacred Afghan civilians, blocked UN food supplies from 160,000 starving Afghans, burned land and destroyed homes, banned media and music, banned women from education and work, and cracked down on religious and ethnic minorities. As such, the Taliban quickly became an international pariah, and at the same time, only 3 states, the UAE, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, which all provided aid, recognised the regime. In October 2001, the US led an invasion of Afghanistan to topple the Taliban, which had sheltered Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda after 9/11. But the Taliban regrouped across the border in Pakistan and began taking back territory less than 10 years later. And when the US withdrew its troops in August 2021, the Taliban immediately ousted the US-backed Afghan government and retook power. Many countries immediately cut ties with Afghanistan and withdrew international aid, which had been equivalent to 40% of Afghanistan's GDP and financed more than 75% of public expenditures, plunging the country into economic freefall. The UN estimates that 28 million people, almost 2/3 of the population, now require humanitarian assistance, and cuts to foreign aid, most notably by the US, previously the single largest donor of food assistance to Afghanistan, mean that more than 3 million children are now facing malnutrition. The Taliban quickly became the most diplomatically isolated government in the world. No other country recognised their claim to Afghanistan, and perhaps their closest ally, Pakistan, which had maintained relations with the Taliban throughout the US occupation, quickly fell out with them over their support for the Pakistani Taliban, which Pakistan considers a terrorist group. However, in the past year or so, other countries in the region have slowly begun engaging with the Taliban, and by July 2024, over a dozen, including China, Iran, Japan, Qatar, Russia, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Uzbekistan, India, Kyrgyzstan, Pakistan and Tajikistan, had ambassadors or chargés d'affaires in Kabul. Several others, including Iran and Turkey, also had a consular presence in Afghanistan. Then, in July 2025, Russia became the first country to officially recognise the Taliban regime as the legitimate government in Afghanistan, with other Central Asian states and Iran reportedly likely to follow, although they might be waiting for China to make the move first. So, why is the Taliban's international isolation now ending? Well, the first reason is just pragmatism. The isolation imposed on the Taliban was mostly about signalling disapproval of their Islamist policies, but there was also some hope it might pressure the Taliban into moderating their politics, or even undermine their grip on Afghanistan. This hasn't happened. The Taliban are clearly committed to their interpretation of Islam, and their hold on Afghanistan looks pretty secure. And there's now a sense that this imposed isolation is mainly harming ordinary Afghans. As such, many countries have chosen to accept that the Taliban aren't going anywhere, and for that reason, they may as well do business with them. This brings us on to the second reason, trade. The Afghan provinces of Ghazni, Nuristan and Helmand are home to substantial mineral reserves, including iron ore, copper, aluminium and rare earths, which are a major source of foreign interest. The Taliban have capitalised on this, announcing in 2024 that they'd secured more than $7 billion of investments from mining companies from China, Qatar, Turkey, Iran and the UK, which include multi-billion-dollar Chinese contracts for projects such as the Mes Aynat copper mine, one of the world's largest copper deposits. Given the global race to control critical mineral supply chains, which China is currently leading, China is keen to build relations with the Taliban, and in 2024 formally accepted an ambassador from the Taliban, despite its concerns about Uyghur militants acting out of Afghanistan. The Taliban are also working with regional partners on various speculative trade and energy corridors, including the Trans-Afghan Railway, a proposed trade rail corridor from Uzbekistan through Afghanistan to Pakistan. Similarly, Russia, which has been seeking new energy deals to help fund its war economy, has invited the Taliban to economic forums in Moscow, removed the Taliban from its list of banned terrorist organisations in March, and in July became the first country to formally recognise the Taliban government. Russia is also exploring ways to re-establish its presence in Afghanistan's oil and gas sector, with a focus on the country's northern provinces, which were historically linked to the Soviet Union. The third reason for the Taliban coming out of isolation is the global migration crisis. This is particularly relevant to the EU, where immigration and asylum have become more politically salient issues. Until 2024, Afghanistan had been the second most represented country of origin among asylum applicants for 6 consecutive years, before falling to third behind Venezuela and Syria. Afghanistan also accounts for the second biggest group, after Syria, of third country nationals in the EU illegally. This is why, in recent months, Germany and Austria have held talks with Taliban representatives about deportations. In July, Germany accredited 2 Taliban officials to work on migration and organised a deportation flight to send convicted criminals back to Afghanistan. And this month, a Taliban delegation visited Vienna for talks on identifying Afghan nationals for potential deportation. But it's not just Europe. Pakistan and Iran, which host large numbers of Afghan refugees, have also been negotiating with the Taliban to repatriate, i.e. deport, Afghan nationals. There's obviously a risk these schemes violate the principles of non-refoulement, a principle of international human rights law that prevents countries from sending people back to a country where their freedom or safety is at risk. But these countries are probably hoping that recognising the Taliban will bolster their claims that it's a safe country for returns. So, what happens next? Well, this trend will probably continue, given that each time a country engages, the less taboo engaging with the Taliban becomes, as evidenced by the domino effect we've seen since Russia's recognition. The media landscape right now is moving so fast that it's quite easy to just rely on the information you already know, or the sources you've grown to trust. But what about everything you don't see? Or what if those sources you trust aren't completely honest? Luckily, our sponsor this week, Ground News, are experts at lifting the veil on media bias. Their website and app, developed by a former NASA engineer, collects thousands of articles from across the media landscape, putting them all into one place for you to easily compare how the news is being covered around the world. For example, this story on the Taliban rejecting Trump's bid to regain control of Afghanistan's Bagram airbase has been covered by 182 sources, with 31 reported by the left and 25 reported by the right. We can even dig deeper by looking at the political bias, factuality and ownership of said sources. That's not all though, as Ground News offers a bunch of super handy features. We especially like their blind spot feed, as here you can see stories that have been disproportionately covered by one side of the political spectrum. For example, if you lean left, you might have missed this story about Saudi Arabia warning Israel that annexing the West Bank would cross a red line and risk relations with Arab states. It's important to know exactly what's circulating online in different echo chambers, instead of purposefully choosing to stay in the dark. We all know that the current media sphere is always trying to get your attention by any means necessary to sway you into thinking one thing or another. So having a website that helps you spot when that's happening is a real game changer. So if you're interested in staying on top of the news and trying everything that Ground News has to offer, you can get 40% off the Unlimited Access Vantage Plan subscription by using the link in the description or scanning the QR code on screen. This limited time offer is only available here, so make sure you go to ground.news/TLDR or click the link in the description to get started and support an independent news platform working to make the media landscape more transparent.